together by your Holy Spirit. God bless them. We thank you for them. Amen. Amen. You can have a seat, guys. Great. Well, we are going to start a series called Visionary Love, okay? And the reason why we're going to do this is because there is relational carnage everywhere, right? Relationships in our culture are difficult to maintain. Also, it's the beginning of football season. So if you're new to Jubilee Church, we always do a thing on marriage at the beginning of football and at the end of football. And we have like intercessory prayer going on all the time. So that's how it works here. But statistically speaking, the odds of you staying in a long-term relationship, especially one that is loving and passionate, are not good. They're very low, actually. And yet, even though there's this carnage around us, and despite the fact that everywhere we look, relationships are falling apart, our desire for this has not diminished. We feel as though we want this kind of relationship. We want this kind of relationship where there's love and passion, and it's committed, and it's for the long term. And we believe in this idea, and we want to go for this idea, even though, again, there's carnage everywhere. We just think that we're going to be the exception, that we will find that special someone, and we'll fall in love, and we'll be in love, and we'll hold hands and swing hands every day and until we're old and gray. Even when we're in the nursing home, we'll be holding hands. They may be shaking, but we will be holding hands for the long term. I have this vision for my life that this will happen. And I believe that's something of the finger of God on your life. The fact that you would want that, the fact that you would want to share your life with someone, I believe, whether you believe in God or not, I believe that's God's fingerprint on your life. Now, some of us are single, and God would have us to be single for the rest of our life, and that is a gift too. That is an amazing thing. That is a very high calling. But for those of us who do have this desire, I believe that's God's fingerprint on your life. And so over this series, we want to talk about casting this vision. Okay, what does this relationship look like? How do we build into this? And how do we sustain it for the long term? And to be honest with you, the large trajectory of this series is going to be those who are single, those who are not yet married. Because as I do marriage counseling and I talk to people about their marriage, I'm realizing, you know what, this advice would have been a lot better before they got married versus after they got married. Because here's what's true. If you're single, this is what's true. You will never, ever have more time to work on your marriage before you're married than when you are. And you'll never be less motivated than you are now. You'll never have more time, and you'll never be less motivated, but it's just true. So I want to say, hey, why wait till the people are after married to share the stuff? I'll do it before they're married. And so next week we're going to talk about sex from a biblical perspective, which may or may not be what you think it is. And then we'll take a little break, because we'll need a break after that talk. And then the next 2 weeks, the week after that, I'll hit directly towards singles about how this looks for you leading up to marriage. But today I want to talk about marriage. Specifically, I want to talk about staying in love, not falling in love. We don't need a sermon series about fall, much less a sermon. I mean, the only thing you need to fall in love is a pulse. If you have a pulse, you can fall in love. Some of you are in love with people you've never even met. Oh, I just love her. I see her on TV. I love her. I love him. And you love people you've never met. And it's never been easier to fall in love. I read an article on Forbes Online in March of this year that said there are 2,500 websites dedicated to, they're dating websites, dedicated to help you fall in love. And they predict, check this out, they predict that they will add 1,000 new sites every year. This is a booming industry. There are 90 million people single between the ages of 19 and 46. And yet, though 40% of their clients are people who are already married. It's never been easier to fall in love, but I agree that it's never been easier to fall in love, but I'm sure you'd agree that it's never been more difficult to stay in love. I mean, one of the reasons why these websites have just exploded, because our desire to be in love and to fall in love is just massive. So we had this dream that we don't want to give up on, that there's someone special out there, but yet we are terrible. We are terrible at putting forth the effort of staying in love. Not just committed to each other, right? not just committed, but passionate loving each other. So again, unfortunately for a lot of us, this is going to be a frustrated aspiration, because where do you find the model for this? A big chunk of us grew up in homes, what they label broken homes where there's only one parent or the other. But even the ones that are, if you were lucky enough to where your parents did stay together, maybe you look at their marriage like, I don't want that marriage. They kind of like, gritted it out. But they weren't, they kind of were married, they're committed, but they weren't really in love. It doesn't really reflect the kind of relationship I want. They kind of survived. I want to do more than surviving. And so I looked up, okay, what does it take in the midst of all this carnage? What does it take for someone to be equipped to be engaged in a long-term relationship for the long haul? And I saw this, and this is what this child psychology site said. This is what your kids need in order for them to be engaged in a long-term relationship. Just see if this was your home life. They need to experience over a long period of time respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, affection. Am I describing the kind of home that you grew up? That you grew up in a home that had constant respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, affection. Now, you may not realize this or not, but the person that you fall in love with, because here's what happens. This need that we have for these things, it doesn't go away. And so now when you fall in love, it's not just that you're coming into this thing with a deficit, but you still need it. You still want it. And so this person that you fall in love with, you're wondering, are they going to treat you with big doses of respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, or affections, or are they just cute? And what was once like a hug around the neck and a stroll through the park now becomes like a chokehold. And give me, and you need to give me this, and I need this from you, and you need this from me, and we came in this with a deficit, and now there's all this tension, and we're trying to squeeze it out of each other. And single, again, you guys, those of you who are single, this is an opportunity. We'll get into some of the details later, but this is an opportunity for you in this season to deal with the junk that you have in your past. You may or may not believe me when I say this, but as long as I've been a pastor, I've never met anyone with a marriage problem. I don't believe that people have marriage problems. I believe people with problems get married. And there's a difference. Because let me illustrate this. Let me introduce you to someone who's going to help me out. This is Mr. Mugg. Say hi to Mr. Mugg. And this is Mrs. Mugg. And like you, they were in college, and they kind of saw each other, and she was into him because he had a future and a degree, and he was always so nice, and he was into her, but we'll look at her, she's a knockout. And so they got together, and they were just really careful, and they were just loving each other, and so they got married, and then once they got married, after kind of a couple of months or so, they kind of bumped into each other, and he's like, "Whoa, what happened there? That makes me so angry," and I didn't. And where did that come from? And she's like, whoa, you know what? I wouldn't get so angry if you wouldn't bump me in all the time. And so what ends up happening is that they keep kind of bumping in each other, and all this stuff comes out, and this feeling that they had, this passion that they had, well, they don't feel that passion anymore. And she's just like, well, he makes me so this, and she makes me so this, and all this stuff just keeps coming out. And the reason why this stuff keeps coming out is because she keeps bumping into me. And the reason why my blue beads come out is because, she keeps bumping into me. And they kind of, but let me just tell you something. The reason why blue beads come out is because that's what's in there. Are you writing this down? The reason why pink beads come out is because that's what's in there. And here's what's truth. What's in there will come out of there regardless of who you're with. Have you ever noticed those who, any kind of an ex relationship, if it's someone that you used to be married with, or even a girlfriend or boyfriend, they're an ex. You hate them more than anyone in the world. Oh yeah, what's happening in Syria, yeah, it's kind of those kind of guys are, I don't really, whatever. We don't hate those guys. We hate the people that we used to be with. In some cases, we have children together, and we hate them. Why do we hate them? Because of how they make us feel. But one of the things I want to say is that feelings can be deceiving for several reasons. One of which is the reason why you feel that way isn't so much because she bumped him or he bumped her. It's because there's stuff in there that was just like waiting to erupt. And it just takes a little bit of bumping in your life for those things to come out. And also feeling, here's the thing about if you're in a relationship or you determine how your relationship kind of quotient based upon how you feel. It's kind of a bad guide. First of all, it's slavery. If you're the kind of person who says, well, if they don't make me feel a certain way, and if they don't do this, if they don't do that, there's going to be trouble, and I'm leaving, and da-da-da-da-da. You are a slave. You're not a slave to the other person. You're a slave to your own feelings. And where do feelings come? Well, they come from, physiology. They come from they come from your past. They come from your history. She reminds me of my mother. Well, I don't see anything wrong with her. Well, she reminds me of my mother. Well, what's wrong with you? I don't know. She just reminds me of my mother. So I don't like her. It's like, well, everyone else likes her. You're the only one who has a problem. But it reminds you of your history. And so you have these feelings, and this leads us into like, well, maybe I married the wrong person. Maybe because we used to have this feeling, and so because I don't have this feeling anymore, I need to go back to the time where I had this feeling. So maybe I married the wrong person, which is another huge myth that we get into when it comes to like, how do we stay in love for the long haul? Well, you got to just find the right person. But that's a myth too. The Bible says almost nothing about finding the right person, except like make sure it's a believer. That's about it. But it says a lot about becoming the right person. So like those of you who are single, I know that you know exactly who you're looking for. You got a list, right? You know who you're looking for. But let me ask you a question. Are you who the person you are looking for is looking for? Are you that person? So let's say you find the person of your dreams. Are you the person of their dreams? Are you the right person? The Bible doesn't say much about finding the right person, but it says a whole heck of a lot about being the right person. And there's this, there's myths out there. Let your heart be your guide. Let your feelings be your. The feelings are terrible. Haven't country music taught us anything? That you should not follow your feelings, and they can kind of lead us in the wrong path. So in the midst of all this chaos, what do? Well, I want to show us what Jesus had to say and how Jesus lived. And I'm going to show you something in John chapter 13. But if you could actually turn to Philippians 2. Go ahead and turn to Philippians 2 in your Bible. And I want to show you something out of John 13 really quick. Okay. Jesus kind of lays out, which I think really is the key for how you stay in love for the long term. He says this, and we're going to get into how he lived in a minute because that's important. He says, a new commandment. Now this word new can mean like brand new, but it really has connotations of being remarkable. Something that was once hidden, but now is found. This new command I give to you, that you love one another. Here's the key for staying in love for the long haul, is you love each other. Some of you are thinking like, man, dude, you should have studied longer. Is that it? Yeah. New command I give, that you love one another. Now, what's remarkable about this, I think, or what's new about this, or what's hidden from us in this seemingly simple phrase, is that he takes a word that we normally use as a noun and he makes it a verb. So we usually think about love in terms of like how someone's, so I love tacos, I love college football, and I love my wife. These are feelings that I have about something. And what's I think unique about this is he takes something that we normally see as a noun and he makes it a verb. And then and I think Jesus probably wouldn't have been like the best marriage counselor, because I think if you would have come to him and you would have like unloaded your feelings, and you begin to say things like, well, she makes me feel this way and he makes me feel this way, and Jesus would probably listen and say, okay, well, wait a minute, are you loving her? Well, I used to. No. You don't used to. You used to feel, but you don't used to this. You don't used to love each other. Are you? The question is, are you loving her? Are you loving her? Jesus said, okay, here's what I want you guys to do. Okay, I know you feel this way. I know you feel this way about each other. I know you want to like kill each other. I know this I want you to go home, and I want you to love one another. I want you to love one another. Jesus, this is why we're here. We're in counseling because we don't love each other. No, you're missing the point altogether. I know you don't feel a certain way. I know there's some things that are going on that are tricky, and we need to talk those things through too. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to love one another. He's not saying that feelings aren't important, but he's saying that they are the caboose on the train and not the engine. That what's driving your relationship isn't what you feel, but it's about what you do. If you love your spouse, if you love her, if you love him, these feelings will follow, but not the other way around. The act of loving needs to be the engine, and feelings need to be the caboose, not the other way around. What drives this relationship can't be how you feel. Has to be how you treat each other. In fact, Jesus said this, which is really in a different context, but I think it's really important to see that he says in Matthew 6:21, he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where you invest, where you make the effort, there's where passion will be. Those with kids know this is true, because you give and you give and you give and you invest in your kids. And they don't wake up day 2, day 20, day 5 million and say, Mommy and Daddy, what can I do to serve you today? That never happens. At least in not my house. I've yet. But you love them. You love them more than anyone. Because you've invested, and because you've laid down, you've sacrificed, you've given, you give, and you give, and you give, and you give. Where your treasure is, your heart will there be also. So he says, this command I give to you, that you love one another, but he doesn't stop there. And he says, just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. So he kind of adds it. He kind of sticks this barb in there. He takes it from being vague to like, hey, just love, and however you define love. But he says, I want you to do this. I want you to actively love each other just as I have loved you, which is why we're going to be in Philippians 2. I hope you're there. There's a Bible in the seat in front of you. If you want to turn there. Philippians 2. So this is Paul talking about Jesus. He's talking about how Jesus treated other people. And you can use this in any relationship, but I think especially, and I want to use it in the filter of a marriage relationship. So he says this in chapter 2, verse 3. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit. And this has this connotation of like a competitive spirit. So if she's telling a story and she gets it wrong, don't interrupt her. No, it wasn't blue, honey, it was red. No, it wasn't 3 months ago, it was 5 months ago. Just let her say it wrong and move on. Just do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit. Don't have this competitive spirit. Now here's the big one. But in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. Have you ever been in a room where somebody was more significant than you? No? Okay, let me help you remember. Have you ever been to a wedding where you weren't the bride? Did you notice how like people stood in line for like 30 minutes to talk to them and no one noticed you? Do you remember that? Like, no one stood in line to talk to you. When she walked into the room, everyone stood. They didn't stand for you. On that day, there was someone who was more important than you. Have you ever been to, in a context where there's been like a war hero or someone, a famous singer or celebrity or something like that, and everyone's just kind of goo and gone over them and just kind of like everyone's showing them all this attention. You're very careful in those things about what you say. Should I say this? And you kind of, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said this. And everyone's just kind of, their attention's there. I was in the Johannesburg, South Africa airport last May. And I was talking to my friend. It's kind of shared my heart a little bit. And he was listening. And all of a sudden, his attention just went. And he said, look, there's Gene Simmons. And there was Gene Simmons. And everyone had their attention, including my friend, was looking at Gene Simmons, and they stopped paying attention to me. And Gene Simmons was being counted more significant to my friend than I was. So we know how this works. We know what it's like, how we treat someone, how careful we are, how kind of, that's how you love her. That's how you love him. You count him as more significant than you. You count her as more significant than yourself. I'm not saying intrinsically that there are people more valuable than others. And I'll show you why I mean that in a minute. It's saying count them as such. Treat them as such. You do this with celebrities. You do this with bride on a wedding day. You do this when the president walks in. You do this when a war hero walks in. Count her, count him as more significant than yourself. And you know how to do it. It's exactly how you treat each other when you first started dating. How careful you were. What you said and what you wore and what you did. Very calculated. Showing up on time. Doing all the research to find the right place. Looking right. Smelling right. All that. You were very careful. There's kind of, you want to take it very carefully. So count others more significant than you. And here's another big one. Verse 4, let each of you not look only to his own interests, but also to the interest of others. Now, I have a problem with this, and I'm sure you have a problem with this too. Because I am naturally interested in the things that interest me. I don't know if you're like that too. I tend to be interested in the things that interest me. And the things that don't interest me, I'm not interested in. Now, that's a problem if me and my wife don't share the same interest. So I'm going through something right now. My wife is a very creative person. And I'm creative, I think, in just a different way, more concepts, problem solving, ideas, things like that. But she's creative in the kind of the, historic sense of the word, like painting, drawing, design, color, look, feel, all that. And just, she loves to decorate. And when she met, I just never found value in decorating. When she met me, all my walls were white except there was a clock and a Willie McGee poster. And so it was just like, that's my idea of decorating. And so so I wasn't interested in that. She's very interested in decorating. She's very interested in, changing out the furniture, moving it around and painting the walls a different color. And it's just I'm interested in like sitting on the couch and not moving things and not spending money on things. I like those things. Those things, saving money interests me. Sitting on the couch and not doing that interests me. And so my wife has brought things up, and I've never just kind of, I don't think, maybe she's not here, so maybe she'd already, but I don't think I've ever said, no, you can't do that. I've just kind of hoped it would go away. I hope it would just she would just forget about it and just, maybe she'll change or something. I don't know. It just maybe that'll, and just kind of move on and move on and move on. And so, we say, hey, here's a little budget, honey. This is something you can do to kind of keep the house the way you like it to be and be creative and have that kind of environment. And so that was all fine, but I wasn't all that interested in it. And then to kind of meet budget, though, she started to say, well, I'll just sell. I was like, she wanted to get something we didn't have the money for. Hey, sorry, I'd love for you to have it, but just, we don't have the money to do all this. And so she started selling stuff. And she started making like 4 or 5 times what she paid for. So she'd buy something for $10 and sell it for $50. She'd buy something for $40 and sell it for $200. And now I'm interested. And now I'm interested. But actually, what that showed me, now the fact that like we have all this different furniture, and she actually makes money doing it. What that showed me is I still wasn't interested in what she was interested in. I'm still interested in what I'm interested in. I'm interested in money and saving money and not having hassle. So as long as that can happen, I'm interested. But if it's just about you, if it's just about what you want to do, if it's just about you being creative, I'm just not interested, so I don't know about that. So I've got some transformation that needs to happen. And the issue isn't whether or not I like antiquing. So those of you who are single, you're saying, okay, I just need to find someone who has the same interest in me. That's not the point. The point isn't whether or not those become your interest. But what the point is, the decision is, are you going to love her? Are you going to love him? Are you only going to look to your own interest, which you can have on your own interest? But will you also look to the interest of others? And then this is really kind of the anchor verse. Have this mind amongst yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. This is the mind of Christ. And if you are a believer, you have this mind. If you don't think operating this way and loving this way is possible, it is possible because you've been given this mind in Christ Jesus. And this is where it gets deep. Who, though was in the form of God, did not count equality with God something to be grasped. Now other translations say it, I think, a little bit differently, which kind of brings it home. The NIV says that though he was God, he never used the fact that he was God to his own advantage. He never once did that. He never once showed up with his boys and said, okay, excuse me, we're going to take the front row, please. I'm God. I'll take that table. I'll take that place. I'll take that seat. He never once used the fact that he was God to his own advantage. Not once. You see, because we come into our relationships, and we think that we are at least half as important. We're at least 50% of this thing. I have certain rights. I have certain demands. I have certain needs. I have certain wants. I come into this. So I make the money. I should decide how it gets spent. I raise these kids. I should determine when these happen. I carry them we all have these leverage points to kind of get the argument in our way, to get the decision to go in our favor. Jesus was the most important person in the room every time. He was the bride, he was the rock star, he was the celebrity, he was the war hero, and he never used that to his own advantage. Not once. That's the model. You don't use leverage. If you want to love your spouse, if you want to love her, if you want to love him, you never use leverage points, ever. It's just nutty. I just hear people saying, well, I make the money, I should determine how it's spent. I'm glad God didn't treat me that way. I'm glad God didn't come to me and say, well, this is, I get to do this. He laid that. He never used the fact that he was God. To his own advantage. Verse 7, but he emptied himself. He emptied himself. He took all of his rights. And he poured them out onto the ground. Have you done that yet in your marriage? Have you ever put in a cup, have you ever put in a bowl or a barrel or whatever you need, have you written things down, have you piled them into a place, all of your rights, all the things you think you deserve, all the ways you think that she must treat you, all the ways that you think he must treat you, have you ever taken that and just emptied it? Because that's what Jesus did. He emptied himself. In our culture, we say she's full of herself. He's full of himself. Jesus emptied himself. How did he empty himself? By taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, taking the form of a servant. You having a servant heart is going to be, it's going to be like oil in an engine. If you don't have oil, you don't put oil in an engine, the engine's going to heat up, there's going to be friction, it's going to tear up the engine. A servant heart, the mind of Christ, you first. No, you. You're standing before the door. No one ever leaves for like 2 hours because you're like, no, you go. Having the mind of Christ, that kind of servant heart is like oil in an engine. So when there's friction and it's not perfect and she's not perfect and he's not perfect, it keeps the engine going when it heats up. That servant heart is so important. And being found in human form, he humbled himself. Nobody humbled him. He wasn't humbled. It wasn't a feeling he had. It was a decision he made. He humbled himself. He decided to humble himself. And the Bible is so clear, not when we loved him, but while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. We don't love first. We love because he loved us first. He made a decision. I am going to love. I'm just going to love. I'm going to make this decision. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. He didn't just humble himself by go picking up the kids without being told. He didn't just humble himself by being on budget. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Let me try to bring this home to you. And there's massive, of course, implications to a text like this. It was almost like Jesus had a dilemma, if you can call it that. On one hand, he can calm down and just assert his rights and be right. So he comes down to earth, you're a sinner, and he would have been right. He could have chose the honor due his name. He could have chose the respect due his name. He could have chose the love due his name. He could have chose all of that. He could have had all that, but he would have been cut off from relationship with mankind. Or he can let go of what was due his name, die on the cross, so he can have a relationship with you and with me. You have a similar decision. You can hold on to your rights. You can hold on to what you think you deserve. You can point the other finger. You can say, well, she does this and he does this and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You can do that and you will kill not only that relationship, but every relationship of anyone who ever comes close to you. Or you can lay down your rights and you can turbo boost, miracle grow all of your relationships. Jesus taught us that. This is how you love one another. This is how you love. This is how you stay in love. This isn't just how you fall in love. Anyone can fall in love. You can trip, fall in a pool, and that's what it is. Cupid, bam, you're in love. To stay in love. To stay in love. You lay down what you think you deserve. You lay down what you think you deserve. You submit to the other person. And you love. Whether they love you back or not. And that's how you stay in love for the long term. And when you see it like that, when you see, you begin to understand why Paul says in Ephesians 5, on the classic text on marriage, in verse 21, he says the key to marriage is to submit to each other. Submit to each other. You first, you first, you first, you first. Now you submit, you lay down your right, you submit to each other. But one of the things that we kind of lose our sight on in that section is that it's tied direct, it's a direct link to verse 18, which says to be filled with the Spirit. It says, do not be drunk with wine, which leads to debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. I know sometimes in our marriages we want to get drunk, but he's saying, like, be filled with the Spirit. Being full of the Spirit is going to remind you of who Jesus is. It's going to point you to Jesus. It's going to connect you with his love. And then and only then will you be able to love like this. Because it is true, you can't really give love out of nothing. You can't love when you're not receiving love. But that doesn't mean that you can't love your spouse if your spouse isn't loving you. And there's seasons where you don't always feel that kind of love. And how you do that is you look to Jesus. You are Spirit-filled. You are focusing on his love, and you are receiving his love. And then you can become what I would call a love philanthropist. A philanthropist is someone who gives excess money to other people. And you can be a love philanthropist. You can have extra love, and you can give it to someone. Because your main source of love isn't your spouse, actually, but it's God himself. As you're looking to him, you're looking to God to love you. You're looking God to fix you. All the marriage advice and the communication skills and all that, at the end of the day, you making Jesus your first love, you looking to him, you looking to what he did for you on the cross and in his life, you being captivated by that love, you being full of his Spirit, that reminds us that we're sons of God, that points us to Jesus, that points to what he's done. You being full of that will enable you to love even when you're not feeling the love from your spouse. Why don't you get out your communication card? If you've never actually surrendered your life to Jesus, if you've never said, Jesus, I accept what you've done for me. I accept the fact that you humbled yourself and you became obedient to death on the cross for me, that I deserve to be on that cross. That's what I deserved. You deserved glory. You deserve praise. You deserve life.